What happens when nearly half of America's House of Representatives unites behind a single goal in less than 3 days? You're about to discover why constitutional experts are calling this the most significant political development since Watergate, and why the evidence this time might be impossible to ignore. Stay with me, because what's unfolding right now could reshape the presidency forever. A dramatic political earthquake has struck Washington as 212 members of the United States Congress have placed their names on an official impeachment resolution targeting President Donald Trump. This marks the third such attempt within a 6-year span, but sources with direct knowledge of House Judiciary Committee proceedings indicate this effort differs substantially from previous undertakings due to what insiders describe as comprehensive documentary evidence. The speed at which signatures were gathered, less than 72 hours, signals an urgency rarely witnessed in congressional proceedings. Political observers note that when approximately half of the entire legislative chamber commits to such action in such compressed timeframe, it represents a seismic shift in Washington's power dynamics. The catalyst for this unprecedented legislative action can be traced to a classified intelligence briefing conducted on January 15th. According to information emerging from that session, evidence was presented, suggesting potential coordination between the current administration and foreign financial interests, allegedly aimed at interfering with active federal investigations. Multiple congressional committees reportedly obtained documentation that appears to show direct correspondence between White House personnel and international banking institutions during periods when Department of Justice proceedings were actively underway. Constitutional law experts have characterized these allegations, if proven accurate, as potential violations of the presidential oath of office, on a magnitude not observed since the Watergate scandal of the 1970s. The significance of this development extends beyond partisan politics. When Republican committee leaders publicly distance themselves from a president of their own political party by affixing their signatures to impeachment documentation, it indicates evidence of substantial weight has emerged. The relationship between the White House and Congress has experienced increasing strain over recent months. Points of contention have included executive orders that some lawmakers view as circumventing legislative authority, contentious cabinet appointment processes, and mounting questions regarding foreign financial connections that career investigators reportedly identified as concerning as far back as September. The situation reached a critical inflection point on January 12th, following the emergence of a whistleblower from within the Treasury Department. This individual provided House investigators with 847 pages of transaction documentation and internal correspondence. 3 sources who examined these materials in a secured congressional facility have indicated the documents allegedly reveal patterns of financial activity that correspond directly with changes in federal enforcement operations. According to those familiar with the materials, specific holds were placed on investigations targeting entities that had transferred substantial sums to accounts connected with individuals allied to the administration. The chronological alignment of these events has raised serious questions among lawmakers who reviewed the evidence, with many concluding the patterns were too consistent. To be attributed to coincidence, the unified response from elected officials representing both major political parties represents a rare moment of bipartisan concern, not witnessed since the Watergate era. The gravity of the situation has prompted even traditionally loyal party members to reconsider their positions. On January 14th, the House Judiciary Committee assembled for an emergency closed-door session in the secure congressional facility located beneath the Capitol complex. What transpired during the subsequent 6-hour meeting would fundamentally alter the political landscape and shift calculations across Washington. Committee members arrived, anticipating a routine briefing on ongoing investigative matters. Instead, they encountered testimony and documentation that reportedly left even the most experienced legislators visibly affected by what they learned. Representative Gerald Whitmore, a Republican chairman from Ohio, with a long record of defending the president through previous controversies, emerged from the meeting in a noticeably altered state. Witnesses who observed his departure reported that his demeanor had changed dramatically. He declined all media inquiries, proceeded directly to his office, and remained there. By late evening that same day, his name had been added to the impeachment resolution. When a committee chairman from the president's own political party signs impeachment documentation, it signals that the evidence presented has crossed thresholds that political loyalty cannot reconcile. The pivotal moment during the classified session came during testimony provided by Deputy Treasury Secretary Margaret Collins. According to 3 representatives who were present, Collins was questioned directly about the transaction records and the pattern of enforcement that had been identified. Her responses prompted immediate requests for enhanced security protocols. Collins stated, according to leaked transcript excerpts, that multiple media outlets have since confirmed that the financial patterns had been identified by career analysts as early as October. However, she indicated that instructions were received from higher authority to suspend formal documentation of these findings. The analysts were reportedly told to cease their work, the reports were not filed, and the investigations were placed on hold. When asked to identify who provided those instructions, Collins paused for 11 seconds before delivering a 4-word response that sent shockwaves through the committee room. I cannot answer that. Representative Diana Thornton, a Democrat from California, serving as ranking member on the Oversight Committee, immediately demanded clarification. According to those present, her voice carried unmistakable urgency. She reminded the Deputy Secretary that she was testifying under oath and asked directly whether she was invoking executive privilege. To avoid responding to the committee's inquiry, Collins indicated that was not the case. Instead, she explained that providing an answer would require discussing classified communications with national security implications. She stated she had received legal counsel advising her that proceeding further could potentially compromise sources and methods. Chairman Whitmore then leaned forward and in measured tones asked the Deputy Secretary to consider the implications of her statement. He wanted clarification on whether she was indicating that obstruction of a federal investigation had been classified as a national security matter, and whether someone within the administration had decided that concealing potential criminal activity should receive protection under classification protocols. Designed to safeguard American intelligence operations, Collins looked directly at the chairman and provided a response that would be widely reported in subsequent hours. She stated that she had been instructed not to discuss the chain of command regarding the financial holds. She confirmed that classification decisions were made above her level of authority, and she expressed deep discomfort with the position in which she had been placed. The committee room fell into complete silence for several seconds. Audio obtained from a representative's mobile device captured the stillness before Whitmore spoke again. His voice reportedly carried emotional weight as he addressed his colleagues, stating that the situation exceeded the gravity of Watergate and represented obstruction concealed behind national security classification. These words were leaked within an hour of the session's conclusion. The comparison to Watergate is not superficial. President Richard Nixon's downfall resulted not from the initial Watergate break-in itself, but from the systematic cover-up that followed the obstruction of justice and the abuse of executive power to conceal wrongdoing from public scrutiny and congressional oversight. The Saturday Night Massacre occurred when Nixon dismissed the special prosecutor investigating his administration, attempting to shut down the investigation entirely. Eventually, Republican senators visited the White House to inform Nixon that resignation was his only option because he could not survive an impeachment vote. The political support necessary to protect him had evaporated. The parallels in the current situation are striking. The allegations do not center on policy disputes, controversial public statements, or communication style. Instead, they involve alleged interference with federal law enforcement activities to protect financial interests and the potential use of classification authority to shield possible criminal activity from congressional oversight. According to those who have examined the evidence, it does not originate from partisan investigators or political opposition research operations. Rather, it comes from career Treasury Department officials who identified concerning patterns months ago and were subsequently told to discontinue their work. The pattern across all 3 impeachment attempts is instructive. In 2019, the first impeachment centered on allegations of abuse of power related to Ukraine, specifically claims of leveraging military assistance for political investigations. The Senate acquitted the president along party lines, with every Republican voting against conviction. In 2021, the second impeachment addressed the events of January 6th at the Capitol. The Senate again acquitted, though 7 Republicans voted to convict, including Mitt Romney, Bill Cassidy, and Richard Burr. The 2025 effort presents fundamentally different circumstances. Documentation exists in the form of financial records that require explanation. Testimony has been provided by career officials describing what they characterize as systematic efforts to obstruct federal proceedings. And 47 Republicans signed on to the impeachment resolution within hours of reviewing the evidence. The pattern demonstrates that when presidents exercise power in ways that threaten constitutional order, even members of their own party eventually reach a threshold beyond which political loyalty cannot extend. Documented evidence of wrongdoing cannot be dismissed solely through partisan allegiance. Legal experts and political analysts are characterizing the current situation as a constitutional crisis developing in real time. Jonathan Turley, a George Washington University law professor who defended Trump during the first impeachment and argued that the Ukraine allegations did not constitute impeachable offenses, appeared on Fox News and made a striking admission. Turley stated that if the allegations prove accurate, they would represent obstruction at a level that cannot be defended constitutionally. He emphasized that while presidents possess broad authority over the executive branch, that authority does not extend to interfering with ongoing federal investigations for personal financial advantage. He described the constitutional boundary as clear. Presidents cannot use classification authority to hide evidence of criminal activity from the branch of government responsible for oversight. If the Treasury documents contain what congressional sources claim, that boundary has been crossed in a manner requiring accountability. Lawrence Tribe, the Harvard constitutional law professor known for his scholarship across the political spectrum, told media outlets that the third impeachment will be evaluated, not through partisan calculations, but through the document. He emphasized that the situation has moved beyond conflicting testimonies into the realm of bank records with timestamps, internal communications with dates and signatures, and testimony from career officials who have no incentive to provide false information and significant risk in providing truthful testimony. The evidence either exists or does not, and everyone who has examined it is confirming its existence. Andrew McCarthy, former federal prosecutor and National Review contributor who has often defended expansive views of presidential authority, wrote that the allegations strike at the core of what the impeachment mechanism was designed to address. If a president uses government apparatus to shield personal financial dealings from federal scrutiny, that represents precisely the abuse of power the founders anticipated when they included impeachment provisions in the Constitution. The founders had witnessed monarchs abusing power for personal gain, and designed a system to prevent it. That system only functions if Congress has the courage to employ it. The political impact is immediate and substantial. The 212 signatures include 47 Republicans, members of the president's own party, who have formally declared that impeachment proceedings should advance. Prior to the previous week, conventional wisdom in Washington held that Republican loyalty would remain unbroken due to base strength and primary election concerns. That calculation has fundamentally shifted. The financial implications are significant. Markets declined 3.2% on Friday. As news of the resolution spread internationally, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell over 1,000 points in a single trading session. International observers are questioning the stability of American governance structures. A Reuters poll conducted on Saturday found that 61% of Americans now support at least holding impeachment hearings, representing an increase from 38% 2 weeks prior, a 23-point shift in 14 days. The institutional damage is already evident. Career officials at Treasury, Justice, and State Department are reportedly documenting all activities, creating comprehensive paper trails, and in some cases, consulting with personal legal counsel about their obligations. The bureaucracy has entered self-protection mode, with personnel preparing for the possibility they may be called to provide testimony. This creates an impossible position for the White House. On one hand, pressure exists to maintain support from a base that remains intensely loyal and interprets any criticism as betrayal. This necessitates defending the president regardless of evidence, characterizing leaks as illegal, and framing the situation as a conspiracy orchestrated by political opponents. On the other hand, the administration must contend with documentation that, according to committee chairmen from their own party, represents obstruction on a scale not witnessed since Nixon. The defense strategy thus far has followed predictable patterns. President Trump posted on Truth Social, characterizing the resolution as a politically motivated attack orchestrated by what he termed radical Democrats and weak rhinos who sold out their voters. He claimed the financial records were fabricated by what he described as deep state operatives attempting to undermine his presidency. He specifically identified all 47 Republicans who signed the resolution, characterizing them as traitors who would face primary challenges and political consequences. However, this defense strategy faces significant obstacles. The evidence does not originate from Democratic Party sources. The whistleblower is a career Treasury official with 23 years of service, spanning 4 presidential administrations of both parties, with no apparent political motivations. The transaction records are bank documents from major financial institutions, not political opposition research. And the testimony that triggered the crisis came from a deputy secretary appointed by the current administration. When the defense strategy requires attacking the credibility of one's own appointees, legal experts note that the argumentative foundation becomes unsustainable. Legal analysts immediately identified contradictions in the defensive posture. If the documents are fabricated, why did the deputy secretary refuse to answer questions about them while citing national security concerns? If there is nothing to conceal, why classify the chain of command? If the allegations are baseless, why are 47 Republicans who defended the president through all previous controversies suddenly reversing their positions? Multiple former prosecutors have noted that the defensive posture itself can be interpreted as evidence of consciousness, of guilt. The situation extends far beyond one president or one controversy. It raises fundamental questions about whether the constitutional framework designed 248 years ago still functions when tested by a leader, willing to push every boundary of acceptable conduct. If a president can obstruct federal investigations by classifying the obstruction itself as a national security matter, then the entire concept of executive accountability collapses. There would be no meaningful limits on presidential power if the president alone determines what can be investigated and what must be concealed from Congress. Former Attorney General Eric Holder, appearing on CNN, stated that the situation transcends partisan politics. He clarified that while he has criticized the administration on policy grounds, this situation concerns whether the United States remains a nation of laws, applying equally to everyone, including the president. If these allegations are proven, and the president faces no consequences, the country has effectively created a monarchical system. The founders' entire constitutional design was constructed to prevent exactly this scenario. They separated governmental powers specifically so that no single person could place themselves above the law. Senator Mitt Romney, one of few Republicans who voted to convict in the first impeachment and a consistent voice for constitutional principles, issued a statement capturing the gravity of the moment. He indicated he had reviewed classified materials available to senators and stated that every American who values the constitutional republic should be deeply concerned about what those materials reveal. He emphasized that facts must be followed, regardless of political consequence, as the oath is to the Constitution rather than to any individual. Republican leadership crisis and party fracture. The scenario is causing significant concern within Republican leadership circles. Reports indicate that Senate Minority Leader John Thune held 3 separate emergency conference calls over the weekend, attempting to determine a unified response strategy. Some senators argued for defending the president and attacking the process, claiming the leak itself constituted the real violation. Others insisted the evidence was too substantial to dismiss, and that defending indefensible positions would damage the party for a generation. The party is experiencing a real-time fracture, torn between loyalty to a political leader and fidelity to the constitutional oath they have sworn to uphold. Meanwhile, the president's core supporters have expressed fury at Republicans who signed the resolution. Social media platforms are filled with calls to challenge every lawmaker who broke ranks in primary elections. They are being characterized as traitors, sellouts, and collaborators with hostile forces to the base. This represents the ultimate betrayal. However, the critical dynamic differs from previous impeachment efforts. This is not merely Democrats and a small number of Republican dissidents calling for accountability. Committee chairmen are involved, members who defended the president through every prior controversy. When those voices shift, the political calculation changes. For everyone still evaluating their position, current status, and next steps. At present, 212 elected officials have placed their careers on the line by declaring that a sitting president should face impeachment proceedings. 47 of them are Republicans. The evidence that triggered this action includes financial records, whistleblower testimony, and a deputy secretary who refused under oath to answer questions, citing instructions from higher authority. This is no longer characterized as partisan theater by constitutional scholars. It concerns the obstruction of justice can be shielded through claims of national security, and whether any president can position himself above the law when Republican committee chairmen openly break with their own party's president over documented evidence. Observers note that genuinely unprecedented territory has been entered. The House Judiciary Committee has scheduled its first public hearing for January 22nd. Multiple administration officials have been subpoenaed to provide testimony, including several who were present when classification decisions were made. The Treasury Inspector General's report on the transaction patterns is expected before the end of the month. Legal teams are threatening to challenge every subpoena through court proceedings. The White House is reportedly considering invoking executive privilege broadly to prevent any testimony from occurring. American families across the country are observing to see whether their elected representatives will prioritize constitutional accountability over political loyalty, historic implications, and what's at stake. For the first time in American history, there is the possibility of witnessing impeachment proceedings where members of the president's own party provide the votes necessary to advance articles of impeachment to the Senate. This represents more than another news cycle that will fade in subsequent weeks. It constitutes a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time. The outcome of these proceedings could determine whether the office of the presidency has any meaningful limits at all. The evidence has been documented. The resolution has been signed. The next phase will reveal whether accountability retains any force in Washington's current political environment. The stakes involved are unprecedented in recent American history. The documentary evidence is more comprehensive than in previous impeachment efforts. And the constitutional crisis is more immediate than at any point since the Watergate era. What happens in the coming weeks will not only affect one presidency, but will establish precedents that could shape executive power for generations. The question before Congress and the American people is fundamental. Does the rule of law apply equally to everyone, including those who hold the highest office in the land? The answer to that question will define not just this moment, but the future trajectory of American democracy itself. The resolution has been formally introduced. The signatures have been collected. The evidence is being compiled. Now comes the critical phase, where constitutional principles will be tested against political realities, and where the strength of America's founding documents will be measured against the pressures of contemporary partisan politics. The world is watching. History is being written, and the outcome remains uncertain.